Okay, so after students learn about the different forms of energy, one of the main concepts we cover is how it's transformed from one form to another. I talk about the law of conservation of energy and how energy doesn't disappear, but it's moved from one form to another. So this is another opportunity to do stations. And early on in the year, this is a very good way to have them get to know each other in small groups, and a good way for you to review your procedures and protocol for working in groups and moving around the room. Because the activity itself is not very stressful, so we can spend a lot of time on some of those procedural things. So again, we're going to have a worksheet where they go from station to station and they try out the different things. So for example, you have a glow stick. What type of energy does it start as, and what does it finish as? So they'll be able to view that, see the chemical energy being changed into light energy. We have a little battery-powered toy, whatever kind of toy you want, and when it's, oops, let me turn it on. You may be lucky enough to hear that. It moves, it has sound, it has light, and it doesn't stop quickly. Okay, we have flashlights. They're very good at knowing about flashlights. This one works with a battery, so it has one type of power. This is another flashlight where they actually have to generate it themselves. So we're starting with mechanical energy, and then it will turn on after you've hand cranked it. So you're creating the energy in there stored to be used later. We have a little hand warmer so that we end up with chemical energy going to thermal or heat energy, and be sure you're using both of those terms interchangeably so they are very comfortable with both terminology. Depending on which acronym you're using, Mrs. Chen or MELT, you might be using the word heat or you might be using the word thermal. Same with light and radiant. Those words can be used equally, and depending on which acronym you may use one or the other, but they are words, vocabulary that they need to know. So be sure that you're using that. For our light energy, here we have a little solar powered sloth. So when the solar light is being absorbed, then he will dance. And they always have fun with these little dancing toys. So you'll probably need to either put this under a good strong light, or you need to put this in your window to get enough light to do that. If you're a little challenged like I am with outlets in my room, sometimes I have to just hold things up and show them that it would be used with electricity, and they know how it works. For example, I would not be having them turn on the hairdryer, but it's something that they're very familiar with, and they should be able to tell that the electrical current is going through the wire. And then the output, you have two different things. We have both sound and heat. The primary goal, obviously, is heat, but we have a byproduct or a waste product of sound as well. Another one also plugged in, but has a different goal. It has the mechanical energy, and by this point, that term should be much more familiar to them, and they can use that in their description. So this is an opportunity to talk about disciplinary literacy. Sorry about that. So when I first was hearing that, I thought, well, I do teach the vocabulary and they should be very familiar with that. But if you've done any work with disciplinary literacy, which is a big push right now, that's not just vocabulary. That's actually making sure they understand how to read the different charts. And that's something that I discovered this year, that my students, during digital learning in the spring, my ELL students did not know what a Venn diagram was. So I was actually having to teach that before they could even apply the concepts. When I'm doing this transformation, we use a visual to help them with that, but you have to teach that strategy. So you're going to start with one form of energy. So for example, we'll just use the hairdryer here, and the fan is the examples. So the fan being plugged in, we're starting with the electrical energy, and then the arrow goes in the direction that the energy is being changed to. That energy, the arrow pointing to where it's going. I always have to be sure that I'm explaining what the purpose of that arrow is. And then it's being changed into mechanical energy as the blade rotates. If it goes to two different forms of energy, obviously you can have arrows that split. So the hair dryer starts again as electrical energy. Some of that is transformed into heat energy, and some of it's transformed into sound energy. But be sure you're teaching what those diagrams mean and how to read them, because it's not as obvious to them as it is to us. Another thing I find that they struggle with is a lot of them, they look at the flashlight and they tell me that it's light energy, and then they tell me that it's electrical or chemical energy, depending on how well they understand batteries. I always remind them that you are starting, where does it start? And if they get confused, then I tell them to start at the end and work backwards. If the goal of this tool is light, then you write down light and you work backwards. Where did that light come from? What kind of energy was used to get there? And then work backwards. So if they're getting confused, you might have to start and work backwards. I'm also providing a card sort activity because it makes them think through the process. So they're matching, this is playing a violin, and it starts as mechanical energy and moves to sound energy. So that's another way for them to practice if you don't have the materials or you want to have a review station with them. I'm thinking that especially since we teach energy at the beginning of the year, we will have a lot of remote learning and trying to get students engaged. You can show these things and they can do it, but it might be a good time to challenge them to find things at their house and figure out what transformations are happening. Maybe give them a list of 2 or 3 different things. Find something in your house that starts with electrical and goes to sound. Let them draw their chart. Let them come up with activities. If they're in the classroom, they can bring in. This is a great time to let them see things in their own environment, whether it be at home or other things that you see in the classroom, and have them figure out what the transformations are.